the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We begin in Brazil, where President Michel Temer says he will not run in the presidential elections on October 7th, while defending the militarization of Rio de Janeiro. Temer made the announcement in a radio interview on Friday. His presidency has been highly controversial since taking over after Dilma Rousseff was impeached. His proposed pension reforms have since been suspended, and he launched military rule in Rio de Janeiro, which recently passed in Congress. Temer denied the move was designed to improve his low approval ratings.
So it
will be difficult to vote on the pension reform law now because public security was a priority for the country. So much so that we ended up having to decree the military intervention.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has proposed what he calls a mega election for this year's presidential polls. Maduro says he wants a powerful election that will deliver the democratic renewal of the country. His first step, an upfront debate with candidates to ensure there is clarity and transparency.
I commit before the public to participate in any presidential debate with the candidates. From now, I commit to debate face-to-face on TV and on social media. 1, 2, or 3 debates so that the people may know the proposals from each of us.
The Venezuelan Electoral Commission has invited CARICOM to be a part of the international observers team for the elections. It has also invited the United Nations. The head of the council said in a tweet that 2 international organizations have been invited to oversee the elections, and that complies with the mission for transparent polls. Ahead of the elections, Venezuela's cryptocurrency, the Petro, has raised $1 billion in orders. President Nicolas Maduro said almost 1 million people have visited the Petro website to learn about or purchase the oil-based digital coin. He says interest comes far and wide, from Colombia to China and from Singapore to Spain. The pre-sale of the Petro will continue until March 19th. Trading starts in April.
We've just completed a deal that has earned $350 million using the Petro, money which will be used to buy supplies for Venezuelan industries. I promise to give every one of you economic growth, prosperity, and a new economy. We've started doing this with the Petro. I'm very motivated. I'm happy. I know the future is ours.
Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza wraps up the African leg of his Dignity tour this weekend with trips to Ethiopia on Saturday and Egypt on Sunday. Arreaza was in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Thursday discussing new agreements on energy, mining, education, and culture. President Gokoso of the Congo highlighted the potential Venezuela has as one of the biggest oil producers and how both countries can mutually benefit from further bilateral cooperation. U.S. sanctions have made it difficult for Venezuela to import vital goods such as medicine, so Venezuelans are finding more innovative ways to feed their needs. Freddie Gillingham has more from Caracas.
The Central University of Caracas has opened its doors to the public. Each day, a queue forms outside the pharmacology department. Here, people of all ages wait for prescriptions, which are cheaper and more easily available here than they are outside in the pharmacies. Basic formulas for medicines are made here by students from David de Sousa's department. David is in charge of a group of eager young students who have swapped homework for the real thing. Their work has become a lifeline to this community. The US and its allies began sanctioning the country in 2017, cutting off its access to credit and markets. These sanctions are affecting the importing of goods, and most importantly, medicines.
Because of the country's medicine crisis, the service has retaken its importance and function as a service that helps the patients, solving the lack of medicine in the market.
deficiencias de medicamentos que existen en el mercado.
A huge amount of basic goods have been and continue to be subsidized under the Bolivarian Revolution. One of its trademark policies, cheap and easy access to life-saving medicines, is at the top of this list of subsidies. Much of the world media have focused on the country's dwindling medical supplies and how it is threatening the lives of its people. But are we being told the full story? Freddie Gillingham, Telesur, Caracas.
Now, the economic crisis in Venezuela has prompted many people to leave the country. Brazil is welcoming the new migrants, saying it will house and it will help them.
The Brazilian government has created a federal committee to assess Venezuelans arriving in the country through the northern state of Roraima.
We are going to build shelters where we can process the immigrants' identities, so we know who we are dealing with. One will be in Boa Vista and the other in Pacaraima, because right now in the Simón Bolívar Plaza there are around 1,500 people, and we want to help them.
The labor union published a statement saying the migration influx is a result of the economic crisis in Venezuela, and governments like Brazil have encouraged that crisis. It also said migrants should not be categorized as refugees.
To be considered refugees, people should be suffering from political persecution due to a conflict or by his political views, ideology, religion, or race. What we have in Venezuela is a complicated economic scenario created by several attacks to its economy, done by imperialists and reactionary governments like Brazil.
Brazil's Refoundation Party says the situation in Venezuela appears worse than it really is, because media networks have manipulated the truth. It has delivered a letter to the government of Venezuela declaring its support of President Nicolás Maduro.
The big media provokes this instability situation in Venezuela. It supports and finances its crisis. It's all a mix of lies and false information with the only aim to deceive the Brazilian population. The same way they did to remove Dilma Rousseff in 2016, and now they want to continue this campaign against Maduro.
According to Brazilian authorities, about 40,000 Venezuelans have crossed the border. In about 2 weeks, 350 of them will be the first to be relocated to the cities of Sao Paulo and Manaus to avoid congestion in the state of Roraima.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. The CARICOM Reparations Committee says the UK owes compensations to Caribbean countries following the ending of slavery. The Center for Reparations Research at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica has highlighted that the UK was still paying off a loan for compensation to slave owners until 2015. The loan at the time was £20 million, which was 40% of the national budget. That figure is equivalent to £240 billion in today's money. The chairman of CARICOM's Reparations Committee, Sir Hilary Beckles, said that that debt has not been cleared.
After 500 years of wealth extraction, and particularly this notorious slave loan that has been extracting wealth out of the Caribbean until 2015. Britain has a moral and legal obligation to put this money back in the Caribbean for the development of the Caribbean peoples. And this is what we have been saying in the reparations movement. Britain and Europe needs to return that money to the Caribbean that they have extracted, and now we have proof of even greater extraction into 2015 of the slave loan.
So, to discuss this further, we're being joined by Jodianne Quarry. She's the research assistant attached to the recently opened Reparations Research Center at the University of the West Indies campus in Jamaica. Hi, Jodianne. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, the people who know about CARICOM's reparations push don't judge the effort very favorably. What would you say to those people?
That they have misinformation, that they don't know how advanced and how complex our struggle and our work has been. The Center for Reparation Research works on the CARICOM's 10-point plan for reparatory justice. And it's not just money, but it's support for reparation in terms of the health crisis created by the colonial governments that were here, the genocide of the indigenous peoples who were here. It's a much more all-inclusive program than many people appreciate it is.
And I was personally very shocked to find out that the UK was still paying off for the loan that they took out to compensate the slave owners in 2015, which is the same year that David Cameron, then Prime Minister of the UK, visited Jamaica and made comments that he did not think that reparations was a realistic option. How much of that did he actually know that the UK was still paying off the loan then?
He was very well aware, as he is a descendant of and is a beneficiary of the loan. David Cameron's family was the owner of enslaved Africans, and so he benefited both as Prime Minister with the government of Britain renegotiated the loans and paid it off, and he benefited in his personal capacity as a descendant of the persons who were paid. He was well aware when he made those statements that the UK continued to pay and people were continuing to make interest off black bodies from the 18th century.
And let's go back to the Reparation Research Center at the University of the West Indies. The research that we just spoke about came from the center. What other research are you all currently working on at the moment?
Several bits of information. That timing is important, and so those things are really important. But we are looking at, for example, what the implications of this compensation mean. It now gives us a starting point to widen our circle of search. Banks like Barclays Bank, JP Morgan, other banks that we didn't know were involved in renegotiating loans and getting compensation money from slavery are now within our sights. And so we are now expanding the circle of persons and banks and institutions that have benefited and profited to this day from the enslavement of Africans.
Thank you so much, Jodianne. We've been talking to Jodianne Quarry. She is a research assistant at the newly opened Center for Reparations Research at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. Other news now. In Argentina, a joint police operation with Russia has led to the arrest of 6 suspected drug traffickers. The two countries were cooperating in an investigation into the trafficking of drugs via the Russian embassy in Buenos Aires. The probe started in 2016 when almost 400 kilograms of cocaine were found in the embassy. The Russian ambassador then called local authorities to report that traffickers were trying to move the drugs by way of a diplomatic flight. In Peru, 15 landing strips in the jungle were blown up by the government. They were reportedly being used for cocaine trafficking. The landing strips, together with drug lab structures, were destroyed by dynamite. The area was used by drug cartels to manufacture and transport cocaine between Peru and neighboring countries such as Bolivia, Paraguay, and Brazil. Peru is one of the world's biggest cocaine producers. Also in Peru, as part of a continuing war on drugs, armed forces seized 7 tons of ingredients used in cocaine production. The joint police and Navy operation took part at the Anapati port in central Peru, an area known as a drug production site. There were reports of an exchange of gunfire between authorities and suspects, but no reports of injuries. Over in Honduras, poverty continues to plague the population. The country has almost 9 million people, but about 70% of them are cash-strapped, jobless, or homeless.
The squares of Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras, show the precarious situation millions of people are facing. Many are forced to ask for help in the street.
Every day we are suffering the consequences. We are in need. We need schools and potable water.
Unemployment and poverty affect millions of people in Honduras. Many opt to work in informal trade to support themselves.
There are no jobs. Here we have electricians, plumbers, builders, painters, but there are no jobs. Those who want to find a better life may only find it in the cemetery.
The lack of government measures to break the poverty cycle is just one of the causes of the crisis. In a recent report, the Anti-Corruption Council revealed that corruption robbed the country of $2 billion.
70% of our population is poor. That shows that neither the government or social programs are reaching the communities that need help. It also shows corruption is still taking away money that should be invested in the most vulnerable sectors of our society.
The situation is quickly deteriorating. Experts say the only thing holding the country's fragile economy are the remittances sent by more than 1 million Hondurans living abroad.
People are forced to consider migrating so that they can send resources back to Honduras. If we didn't have these remittances, Honduras would be in even worse conditions.
According to the Center of Democratic Studies, poverty affects the rural areas the most because of a lack of measures to boost the agrarian sector.
Brazil's health ministry warns of possible health issues after basins in a mine overflowed, dumping toxic waste as far as 2 kilometers away. Heavy rains in the Barcarenas region is being blamed for the waste spills on February 17th and 19th. A research institute connected to the health ministry is calling for an emergency plan to provide water and monitor the health of nearby residents who depend on the well for water. The company, Hidroalunorte, has denied causing the leaks.
These tributaries that contain calcium, when they come into contact with the skin, can cause very harmful hematologic damage. The risk is associated with primary contact with these waters and consumption of it. When we went to the Bom Futuro community, we found that the artisan wells had been built on the margins of the river.
A group of scientists in Mexico want to combat breast cancer by using nanotechnology. Let's take a closer look at their research.
Researchers at the Metropolitan Autonomous University's Iztapalapa campus have been working for 6 years on developing a treatment using gold nanoparticles to combat breast cancer.
We were looking for alternatives to existing therapies. Mainly we wanted to avoid secondary effects from chemo, which devastates the patients.
Scientists discovered that rough surface nanoparticles are capable of destroying carcinogenic cells. The procedure is still experimental, but it's about to move to a new stage that could show its true potential.
We've
got a model using carcinogenic cells in a chicken embryo, which mimics the desired environment well enough. We're going to see how the nanoparticles interact with the cells in a living environment.
Regardless, the biggest hurdle is for the technology to meet the medical needs of patients.
It's difficult to simply say that since the nanoparticle worked in a lab, we can do human trials. We must first pass many tests, using specific drugs. We must pass through many filters so that our patients have confidence in us.
Developing treatments such as these are very important, given that every year almost 1.4 million breast cancer cases are diagnosed. In Mexico, breast cancer is the main cause of death for women over 25.
I know a woman, she's the wife of a friend, who was diagnosed with breast cancer and she recovered. She helped me through my diagnosis. She gave me advice on what to do. I trust in science and in doctors. I know I can overcome this.
In most cases, breast cancer is diagnosed at an advanced stage. This is one of the reasons why self-examinations are recommended as a way to extend life expectancy.
We'll take another short break. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. The governor of the Nigerian state of Yobe has spoken to the parents of girls feared kidnapped by Boko Haram, and he has addressed their concerns about the delayed response. Local authorities told families the delay in the state's response was to avoid friendly fire and to make sure the Nigerian Air Force was aware that those looking for the girls were not to be mistaken for Boko Haram fighters. The Nigerian government is trying to mitigate anger in a town where an undetermined number of girls are still missing. The U.S. Special Counsel Robert Mueller has filed fresh criminal charges against President Donald Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort. Mueller has also charged Manafort and his business partner, Rick Gates, with bank and tax fraud. Both men are already facing criminal charges, including conspiracy to launder money and conspiracy to defraud the United States. The special prosecutor is also investigating possible collusion between the Trump campaign and a Russian intelligence operation to skew the 2016 presidential election. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will be launching more sanctions against North Korea in a move to intensify pressure on Pyongyang to give up its nuclear and missile programs. The actions will block assets held by North Korean firms in the United States and prohibit U.S. citizens from dealing with them. They will also affect some Taiwanese passport holders and shipping and energy firms from mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore.
Imposed today the heaviest sanctions ever imposed on a country before. And frankly, hopefully something positive can happen. We will see.
The UN Security Council has delayed until tomorrow the vote on a draft resolution calling for a 30-day ceasefire in Syria. Such a ceasefire would allow aid deliveries and medical evacuations. Yesterday, Russia proposed amendments to the resolution drafted by Sweden and Kuwait, arguing that the language was unrealistic and that the 15-member Security Council could not simply impose a truce on Syria without consulting the relevant parties. But critics of the delay say that Russia is simply trying to give Syrian forces more time to defeat anti-government rebels. Now, let's have a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
Thousands of Palestinians have protested in 14 different locations across the West Bank. Hundreds also demonstrated in 5 areas near Israel's border with the Gaza Strip. Protesters set fire and threw stones at the Israeli soldiers. The Palestine Red Crescent reported that 18 people were wounded in clashes with military forces. Congo's military forces have taken a base used by the Allied Democratic Forces, marking a significant victory for the country. Congolese authorities accused the ADF of a series of attacks between 2014 and 2016 that killed more than 800 people. The armed group is also blamed for an attack on a United Nations base in December that killed 15 peacekeepers.
We are planning how to chase them down till the end, because we cannot allow an armed group to continue to kill, to massacre our people, since we are here to serve our citizens and to protect them.
Heavy rains and extensive flooding have hampered rescue efforts to find 14 people believed to be missing following a major landslide on the Indonesian island of Java. Families have been forced to leave their houses as many of the main streets are entirely flooded. French police have found a painting by 19th century master Edgar Degas in the luggage compartment of a bus near Paris. The painting was stolen 9 years ago from a museum in Marseille. The Minister of Culture confirmed that the painting, called The Chorus Singers, could be worth around €1 million.
And finally, conservationists in the Dominican Republic say they're working against the clock to prevent Caribbean manatees from becoming extinct. The number of manatee deaths due to beaching this year has reached 57. Scientists are working to determine the possible causes of the rise, which include the increased development of resort areas and illegal hunting. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our Telesur website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Saini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.